The 205 is now starting. It has the engine and everything in it, and it's been driving up and down the yard so far, so we'll give it a quick start up. Glow plugs, you still have to wait on them, but it is starting a lot quicker than the old engine. Don't want to rev it too much, otherwise it would fill the shed. So the bonnet, it now closes properly. There was a bit of a concern with the top mount intercooler. The factory ones I don't think had a top mount intercooler, but it fits in this gear. Whether or not that top mount intercooler saps any power, driving the car as it is, it's powerful enough. So I'll just give a quick overview of what was done. The clutch cable, it's running a ZX clutch cable, not the one out of the ZX. It had to be a new one, as the old cable snapped when it was installed. But it is just a standard Citroen ZX clutch cable, so it's retained the pull type clutch arm, the standard clutch arrangement as it was on the ZX. Regarding gear linkages, there wasn't a huge pile to do. Just this arm here on the gearbox had to be changed from the 205, the original arm on the ZX box. There was a bit of clearance issues, the wee links weren't properly lining up, so there's a split pin in that. It was punched out and the arms were swapped over. That went in easy enough. The speedometer drive was taken off the 205 gearbox. It's a mechanical drive, and the speedometer still works and has a very wobbly old Peugeot speedometer about it. So the car is running a thicker radiator from a 205D turbo. It's a thicker core than the naturally aspirated engine radiator would have been. The radiator didn't just fit straight in. The power steering pump, and I'll show it when the car is lifted, the lower radiator hose was interfering with the power steering pump, so the radiator had to be moved forward. Normally the radiator sits into a plastic housing, and that also contains the fans. That's gone. I made up a radiator bracket. I'll show it when the car is lifted. And there is also wee radiator holders, or upper brackets, so it's in solidly, and it's, you know, it's isolated with rubber. But that's how the radiator is held in now. It doesn't have the original fans. Actually, there's no fans in right now. It's got the I'll take it off. Behind the radiator grill, you'll see how the what's been done. Hold that in. So this is the fan cowling. It has been hacked to pieces. The fans aren't there anymore. Because the radiator has been brought forward, the fans wouldn't fit anymore in between there and the bumper. But I kept this here piece because it saves me trying to fabricate something to hold these tangs on the bottom of the radiator grill. The plan is to fit the slimline fans that you can get off eBay and places like that in here. Electronic temperature gauge will be put in. This car doesn't have one because it has the basic instrument cluster, but that'll be installed, and the fans will be running through the original wiring, so they'll work as they did before, using the temperature sensor on the radiator. The grill just goes back in as it did originally. It just goes back in as it should. When it comes to putting the fans in, it should be easy enough to fit. So the oil filter, the original oil filter wouldn't have fitted in this gap between the radiator and the engine. So what the car now has is a oil filter of a Reynolds Clio 182 or some one of the 2 litre, the fast Clios. It's a done thing on the 205s apparently, and the man in the motor factors looked it up. Apparently this filter has the right flow characteristics. The only downside is you do have to change it a bit more often, and it would give a Renault Modus a run for its money and ease of access. Well, from the top it's not too easy to access, although from underneath it's okay. The factory fitted the factory 205D turbos have a different type of oil filter housing, which brings it up and has it sitting about here. I'll try and put a picture on screen. That seemed impossible to get. That oil filter there just works, and it was handier. As for plumbing the system up, I just copied how a factory 205D turbo was done. It's retaining the oil cooler. I didn't want to lose that. Some people say run it without an oil cooler. I thought it's there for a reason. Like the bigger radiator, it's worth keeping it. So it has that. Rather than point at random bits of the engine bay, I have a CAD diagram of the routing of the cooling system. Should be a bit more useful than bits of descriptions you get off the internet of how to do it. So I'll put that on screen as well. It's using standard bits of hose from the 205 and the ZX. Everything's still working as it should. This is the expansion bottle from the 205, kept original. And it has still got coolant in it. I've put a couple of dishwasher tablets in there to flush the coolant system, just to get everything cleaned. And then a new bottle of antifreeze will be going in soon. With regards to power steering, it's the standard pump off the ZX. This is the reservoir bottle from the 205. Some of the hoses are 205, some of the hoses are ZX. I think it's the high pressure hose is a ZX item, and then the return hose is just the 205 item. There wasn't actually too much to do there, just fill up new fluid and it seems to work straight away. The air intake pipe, which was causing a bit of a problem, it was hitting the brake master cylinder. It has been taken out of a 306. It was either HDI or D turbo, but it's shaped here just to clear the master cylinder. Not by much, but it's just enough to do. And then it's back onto the pipe out of the ZX, and there will need to be an air filter put in here. Can't get the standard filter box to fit anymore, but I see a lot of people just put a K&N filter there. Regards wiring, I had not much to do. There might have been a couple of connectors, maybe for the alternator and the starter. It was either changing from a spade connector to a ring connector, or some of these funny PSA connectors. I tried to swap sensors off the 205 engine onto the ZX engine. Kept the need to cut the loom apart down to a minimum. There's a new earth lead, as the old one was a bit past its best, and I had one of them funny screw-on type terminals which aren't really very good. Wiring loom, just it was very straightforward. It is an XUD, so it is very easy to wire up. One of the things about the cooling system was that there was a wee plate in here with a hose coming off it on the ZX engine, and when I was looking around the cooling system I wondered where it went. Looking at another 205D turbo, it just had a blanket plate there, so it was obtained from the old engine. The wee plate came from here. So on the ZX engine there's a wee hose coming out of it. This engine here, it was blanked off, and that's just how I took the blanking plate off that and put it onto this engine here. Seems to be how the other cars, other 205D turbos were, and that the cooling system seems to work. The heater's working grand, the engine's not. But I haven't got a temperature gauge to monitor it yet, but it doesn't seem to be overheating. What had to be bought then was this T-piece, and there's a straight piece of pipe here for the oil cooler. But other than that, it is just plumbed as a 205D turbo would have been plumbed. Throttle cable is the 205 item, and it works grand. So I'll lift the car up and give a bit of a look at it from underneath. The bonnet closes. One of the problems was getting the radiator to fit and ensure that the bonnet catch didn't hit the radiator. So it took 2 attempts of making lower radiator brackets to get the bonnet to close. As for lowering it and putting bigger tyres and all on, it would ruin the sleeper look that's looking to be achieved with this car. It does look quite nice in its standard form. It would be a shame to put on big wheels and lower it and things like that. It does actually handle quite well. I just personally think that the brakes would benefit from being bigger. It is solid discs in the front, even maybe the vented discs. But I do remember 306D turbos were not great at braking. I don't know what options are. Obviously the best thing in Peugeots is the 406 Coupe Brambos. Then getting them to fit under the wheels is an issue. Underneath the car, this is the drive shaft that had to be worked on. That's in and working. The other side, the driver's side, didn't need anything done to it. It went in straight away. Main challenge with putting in the bigger radiator though was this power steering pump and this lower radiator hose. Using the standard plastic housing that held the radiator and the fans, it was just too far back. The radiator was just too far back, and this belt would have just wore a hole in that radiator hose. So I made up a new bracket out of 3mm plate. Might have been a bit too much, but it didn't have any 2mm about. I welded it in and it's bolted into place here. 8 bolts are probably a bit overkill as well. The tin in this car isn't very thick, but it's in and it holds. So it's brought the radiator forward. It's about 20mm forward of its original mounting point. Also had to bring it down a bit. There was a bit of trial and error getting the mounts to work. The first radiator mount I used, the radiator was too far up. Then the bonnet wouldn't close. The catch was hitting the radiator. Second radiator mount I made, I brought the radiator down, but then whatever way geometry had worked, it was then hitting this belt again, this lower hose. So the third one involved bringing it forward, and it also had it down. I can put up CAD drawings, links to CAD SolidWorks models if you want to make that lower radiator bracket. The end result is that this lower hose is not interfering with this here belt and pulley. Even if that rear engine mount was to go bad, there's still plenty of clearance. There's about 10mm clearance there, so it should be sufficient. This is the power steering pump from the ZX. It fits quite well. It's clear of everything, it's not hitting the road. The subframe is the original item out of the diesel, the standard diesel. So it was easy to fit that way. New bolts were fitted, or new hardware was used to connect the exhaust pipe up to the manifold. That's the exhaust from the ZX estate, but it has been cut at this point here. The shape just didn't match up with what was on the 205. So the plan is to get someone to fabricate up an exhaust that will connect from here to a relatively original looking back box. There was a run of wiring loom went down along this lower part here where this radiator mount now is. I moved it all up to the top. Keeps it safer away from road damage. So it's now up there, and this radiator bracket sitting in its place. The wire was sufficiently long to bring it up there anyhow. And this is the oil filter here. Not brilliant access, but a standard oil filter tool will get that off, no problem at all. It just means, with it being a smaller capacity, that the oil filter will have to be changed more frequently. There was a small amount of cutting at the bodywork. There was a toe and eye on this side. Generally, toe and eyes on these old cars, they're rotten anyhow, so there was no bad feelings about having to cut that out. Generally, if you're going to tow an old Peugeot like this, get a strap onto the subframe. It's not going to deform. And that's the car. It was a fairly straightforward swap. The plan is I have the 305 1.9 GTX up there. I want to put an engine in from a 405 turbo diesel estate. It has been rebuilt, so that's the next project, is to convert that 305 from a petrol to a turbo diesel. I'll get a video of this car driving, maybe have access to a drone. I'll show some footage of the car driving on the road too, perhaps. Inside, the car is completely standard, but the gauge cluster is the standard gauge cluster with the speedometer, the fuel gauge, a collection of warning lights and the clock. That's one problem, it doesn't have a temperature gauge. Might put one here. Well, that would mean drilling that hole there, or putting one there. There's just open to ideas, but I don't want to make it look too hacked apart on the inside. The rest of the car is completely original inside. There wouldn't be much to suggest what it is under the bonnet, but it is very quick. So it's starting up very easy. Just wait for the glow plug light to go off. Runs well. I'll try and get some black smoke shots of it when it's outside the shed. It's a bit smelly and it's inside the shed.